There's more and more people in Canada and locally expressing greater and greater concern about the particulate spraying of aerosol material being distributed by jet aircraft. Personally, I just recently interviewed Clifford Carnicom of the Carnicom Institute, and we were interested in what the Green Party's position is about trying to expose this matter in a more open forum debate, as magazines like the Angora and locally run media are trying to bring this to the forefront. We can't seem to get any platform to discuss it because it's a matter of great concern for the environment.
Yeah. The position is, of the Green Party and me personally, is I want to find evidence that allows us to take a position that it's actually occurring in the way in which you've described it.
Carnicom Institute.
I think it's quite possible. I'm very concerned about geo-engineering. I think it's quite possible that there's a government somewhere in the world that thinks it's a good idea. We currently don't regulate it. We don't have any global treaties against the distribution of particulate matter in the upper atmosphere. There are a lot of people who've talked about trying to reduce the impact of increased CO2 by actually deliberately distributing particulate matter to lead to an artificial short-term cooling. There's also, as you have suggested, people who are thinking it's in the jet themselves to deliver toxic materials. I'm trying to get to researched, empirically verifiable sources. So
may I recommend the Carnicom Institute to anybody who wants to investigate?
Please come up and give me anything afterwards, because I've been, obviously, I should say obviously, maybe it's obvious to you, it might be obvious to everybody. When I ask Environment Canada for information that they have, when I look to government sources for any information that verifies this, they say it's just not happening. I'm prepared to be sufficiently skeptical to keep looking to find out when and where it's happening, and I know that it's widely held as a concern in this community, so I don't dismiss it. I just don't have enough information to say on a verifiable, there's certainly nothing in the peer-reviewed literature. And
well, it explains the peculiar trails we see behind jet craft that we didn't see 15 years ago.
And I know a lot of people agree with you, and I'm being as fair as I can about it. I'm not with you yet, but I am looking for the information.
We just want to open discussion.
Too many people in the room, but I have to have science. I get vilified for standing for science when there really is science. So I've got to be very careful not to step out into an issue where I can't find the information that backs me up. But there's a lot of opinion that backs it up, and there are a lot of photographs that are peculiar. I agree with you. But I don't have the science to say out loud, yes, I think this is happening. I do think there's reasons to investigate what's going on, because a lot of people believe something is occurring as you've described it. And I'm trying to on the aisle there.
Nuclear weapons in the Middle East and the proliferation of them and all the rest of it. And I'm not hearing anything about nuclear power plants, which Canada is great for producing. We've got over 400 worldwide leaking. We had Chernobyl, we had 3 Mile Island. Now we got Fukushima that nobody ever talks about, that is melting down and totally destroying the Pacific Ocean, Japan, and soon the west coast of Canada. And what has Harper done? He's shut down scientists, he's muffled them, he's shut down our radiation detectors. What are you doing to turn this around so the people of Canada are made aware of what is really going on to our planet?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you asked the question. Nuclear proliferation for weapons is also very closely tied to the spread of what's so-called peaceful nuclear energy. And this is a position when Canada used to have an ambassador for nuclear disarmament within the government of Canada. It was a wonderful former progressive conservative MP named Doug Roach. I don't know how many of you know of Douglas Roach. Anybody who's followed nuclear disarmament issues will know him. And he's made this point very strongly, that any push for more nuclear energy plants inevitably leads to greater risk of nuclear proliferation for weapons, and of course the risks of terrorist acquisition of nuclear materials. So I favor, and the Green Party favors, the phase-out and shutdown of nuclear energy globally. In terms of Fukushima, what have I done? I did put out, I'm the only MP, I think, that's put out any press releases at all. Not that press releases really help, goodness knows, but because they don't get any coverage unless we put them out. But I did call for, at the time Fukushima was happening, for public monitoring, for public information in Canada. Canadians were getting much less information than U.S. citizens. And when it became apparent that the groundwater leakage for Fukushima was still reaching the Pacific at alarming levels, I wrote to John Baird, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to Gail Shea, Minister of Fisheries, to Rona Ambrose, Minister for Health, to Jerry Ritz, Minister for Agriculture, to ask for monitoring of foodstuffs, particularly seafood products that could have been swimming through the waters in Japan, to ensure that if there was radiation monitoring and information provided to Canadians. They're all of the things that I haven't yet. I double-checked because Fukushima has been coming up at other town halls. So I double-checked with my office in Ottawa. I haven't had any response from any of the ministers to whom I wrote back in August about what we were seeing happening with Fukushima. But the letters and the efforts are on the website. I'm grateful that it gets raised in the town halls, because then when I go back to Parliament, I can say, look, people in my community want to know, what is this government doing? I will tell you that in terms of my background and knowledge on radiation, I don't think that we need to panic about our food now. I was very concerned. At the time Fukushima was happening, there were a lot of airborne radiation that could have been affecting milk and dairy products. We weren't monitoring for it. We should have been providing some cautionary advice for Canadians. Right now, I think there's reason to be concerned in terms of seafood products, but we don't have any, looking at what they're getting from the United States, it still doesn't look as though we have any reason to be panicking. So don't panic, but we have a right to information and we're not getting it, so I'll keep pushing for it. Now, let's see, who other hand?
The last question here, I want to ask you, in terms of jobs and the pipeline debacle, where would you stand in terms of helping our economy with the reindustrialization of hemp products in Canada? So being that it can be used for plant-based petroleum products, we can use it for carpet, we can create the chassis of an automobile with hemp. But they've outlawed hemp for the last 60 years or so. If you support hemp industrialization in Canada, what steps would you take to grow this avenue for new income?
Okay, well, it happens that my party policy, and I personally support the legalization, taxation, and regulation of cannabis, period. At the same time, the non-THC hemp has tremendous potential for non-tree paper, for all kinds of materials, from fabric to, as you say, to chassis. And for parts of Canada's agricultural sector that's really, particularly tobacco farmers, Southern Ontario tobacco fields, hemp is a perfect substitution crop as more and more farmers want to get off growing tobacco and on to growing non-THC hemp. The kind of reefer madness laws that make no sense make it very hard to also have the industrial hemp activity taking place. So I'm entirely in favor of getting rid of silly laws, and that would also allow us to have law enforcement agencies prioritize their work in law enforcement on things that actually are a threat to public safety and security. And it's not saying in any blanket way that, I know your question was about non-THC hemp, but in terms of cannabis, personally I think there are health risks with cannabis, and we should not be promoting the use of cannabis. But in the same way, we don't promote the use of tobacco, but it's legal, and we don't promote excess alcohol consumption, but it's legal, and we should treat cannabis exactly the same way. So that would, I think if we regulate, legalize, and tax cannabis at the same time that we start exploring all the various ways that hemp can be used as part of a new industrial sector, it'll all get a lot more straightforward.
What happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. But what happens if my concerns are justified and ignored? Nothing good.